I don't think there is any game in 2025 I am more interested in than Elden Ring Nightreign. To me, the Souls-like and roguelike genres are diametrically opposed, so I wasn't entirely sure how one could balance difficulty with randomness. But if anyone could accomplish this, it would likely be the company that created the Souls-like genre, From Software. With a massive array of returning bosses, countless builds to create, and a diverse cast of characters, is it a must-play game this summer, or is it a worse version of both genres?
That's the name of the mercenary outfit you
So, I'm going to be more honest than I probably should be and say I won't get into the narrative. I'm simply not an expert of Elden Ring lore, and while I'd usually make an effort, there is simply far too many people better suited to this task than myself. That being said, I can confirm there is some dialogue, a general ending, and each character gets a small story, so there is more to explore than just Nightraign's map.
Then you're good and ready. The traitor you're after.
Each run starts with players selecting their character and overall team composition. While it's entirely possible to win with 3 of the same type, the best runs have someone who can fulfill certain roles. These being ranged attacks, revives, tanking attacks, and so forth. A big part of success ultimately hinges on how well these characters are understood. On a basic level, I don't think any character is particularly deep. Guardian blocks and pulls enemies together, Duchess can rewind time for additional damage and can go invisible, Raider is about knowing when to retaliate, and you get the point. Even if these characters are simple in concept, it is ultimately the execution of these abilities that takes skill. It simply isn't enough to rewind or grapple around, they need to be well timed to ensure maximum efficiency. I think it is an interesting concept, one that feeds well into the genre. With proper mastery, the potential these characters offer is insane. The only problem is whether or not the other people can make the most of them. First and foremost, I don't think the multiplayer experience in Nightreign is bad. What I think is it suffers from the same core issue as the first Descendant. There, the biggest issue with matchmaking is the overall skill. It makes sense, I can spend a bit of time building my character and beat the most difficult boss in seconds with ease. Once other people are added, I can still do it. Things just take significantly longer. For example, the run shown here, I did over 80% of the damage dealt to the boss. In Nightraign's case, I imagine all the great to amazing players are simply opting to play solo, especially after that balance patch. This makes matchmaking a hodgepodge of good to, let's go with less than good players. The only real exception being pairs, which obviously can go either way, though once they add the duo mode, this will obviously change. Still, I'd say the general experience was fine. It was rare someone refused to follow the group, and in most cases, we made it to the final boss. Unfortunately, that can tend to be a mixed bag, though one I expect to improve long term. That said, I do think runs take entirely too long. I don't know the exact amount of time, but going off a couple video captures, it takes about 15 minutes for the day boss to spawn. As a result, the average run is 30 minutes plus, however long it takes to defeat the 2 day bosses and the final boss. In practice, I'd say you can expect a run to last 45 minutes. Once factoring in the oddly long matchmaking, 1 run per 50 minutes to an hour sounds about right. That is a pretty substantial amount of time to devote to a run. It's really a shame more time management features weren't added. Simply giving players a way to skip straight to the boss would be a substantial quality of life improvement. I forget how many runs resulted in us waiting at the end, or waiting for the boss to spawn once the ads were cleared. Sure, the amount of time saved is rather small, I want to say maybe 4 minutes a run, but it would greatly improve the experience. Same with auto-skipping the door opening sequence. I would have also loved to see Nightreign implement the first Descendants continue or abort option after each day. I know some people will be against throwing in the towel because it only takes a little luck to be successful, but it would go far in avoiding a scuff run. I don't even mean bad teammates, as sometimes the options on the map are not ideal. Honestly, anything would be better than being stuck in a match for nearly an hour or opting to take some kind of penalty for a better situation. Ideally, this will be something implemented, or at least considered. I mean, they listened on the duo option and did change single player. One phrase I hear a lot as a longtime Destiny player is people will optimize the fun out of the game. And in a lot of ways, I think that is true for Nightreign as well. Now, to be crystal clear, I don't mean builds or how one approaches a class, but rather the map itself. Since there is a time limit spread across 2 days, a lot of runs will devolve into following the best practices. Ignoring ads, knowing which battles to engage in, prioritizing key locations or flasks, things like that. In the video here, you can see a run where we try to optimize. Now, I am sure there will be some debate on the choices we made. That is natural, but the overall point is this run produced a lot of options to help mitigate bad RNG. On another run, I followed someone else, which quickly resulted in disaster. It's clear by how many locations are being ignored, how much time was spent fighting bosses we weren't prepared for, and it was just bad. Now, some of this was luck. We got the amazing bell-bearing knight combo with giants, but overall the run was destined for failure. And I don't bring this up because I want to play however I want, but rather it highlights how samey Nightreign feels long term. Maps generally have a rotation. I usually know who I can bully and who can bully me, where the buds spawn, and it starts to become rather predictable. At least in the sense where I have a good idea of what's going to happen by just looking at the map. To me, this goes against some of the charm of the roguelike genre. Every run feels like a series of chats, with there being slight differences between runs. Even some of the bidder changes are rather limited. Shifting Earth locations change the map in favor of a unique secret. It's actually pretty cool, though the value varies. Getting a single weapon upgraded to the highest level is a great reward, whereas having to rely on Frostbite is rather limited long term. Raids work the same way. Sometimes a random event will occur that forces players to engage with or attempt to ignore. However, there's a pretty big gap between making a deal for a specific benefit and gaining FP when you use a flask. I just wish there was more consistency and value, at least to the point where I'm always excited instead of questioning whether the reward is worth the time and effort to obtain. Beyond this, there are even guides that suggest you should defeat as few enemies as possible, focus on specific locations, to even dictating how few choices you are actually presented with. Seriously, I've seen like 6 different Reddit threads make it to the front page that are completely different. In some ways I get it. This is a natural concession of trying to apply this concept to the roguelike genre. It's just a shame to see. I had hopes there would be more diversity than a question of whether I fight a titan, knight, or monk for a choice of 2 weapons and a perk. That being said, I actually kind of like the RNG system. Much to my surprise, it's more well thought out than I expected. As previously mentioned, most bosses give 2 weapons or a specific perk. I like this because even if the weapons have no value, the perk can be something useful. Select other activities have predetermined rewards. Summoning gives rooms, which are used to level or buy fins, or a perk. The last boss of a day offers 3 perks. The mine boss is a tier 3 upgrade material or weapon. As previously alluded to, events have largely predetermined benefits as well. Locations also state which elements they are. I can make it a point to try and get a specific elemental weapon to even knowing additional key elements will spawn. Sometimes RNG also works against you in fun ways. Summoning is a great example of this. At times we will fight an easy boss, and other times we recognize it simply isn't worth it. This happens a lot before the day boss, as we try to do it in the minute or so before the ring closes. Most of the time it works, sometimes we have to bail, and a few times we fight in the rain. It makes things interesting, mostly because it isn't clear whether it was a good or bad idea until after the choice was made. I also love the potential quality teammates offer. I've lost track of how many runs I get an amazing weapon like Rivers of Blood on a character that can't make the most of it. This allows me to give it to someone who can, making the overall team stronger. Unfortunately, this seems rather uncommon in multiplayer at the moment, though long term it might improve as the player base skews hardcore. When everything is said and done, one of the biggest questions is going to be how difficult is it to play? To be honest, I'm not entirely sure where I'd say the experience falls. There are absolutely runs where RNG blesses the team, and it is extremely easy to overcome most challenges. Encounters are also across a wide range of difficulty. Getting Oracle Envoys is a massive boon, as they are so weak a single art attack can clear the entire encounter. Other times there are bosses with set mechanics, such as the Flame Chariots. These can be annoying to fight, though simply jumping on their head and hitting the weak spot will instantly defeat them. A few are also so easy a coordinated team makes them a joke. Flame Monk is perhaps my favorite example of this, as most times I encountered him, he wasn't even able to retaliate before defeat. On the other end are things like Royal Carrion Knight, not the hardest to defeat in terms of rotation, but absolutely a boss that will punish mistakes. The only thing I will really criticize Nightreign for are the 3rd day bosses. Everything else appears often enough to get a good idea of how to approach it. Absolute worst case, you make it a point to never engage, or it just doesn't appear again on subsequent attempts. However, this doesn't apply to the 3rd day bosses. I don't think any of them have extremely difficult moves, though they can be rough for 2 distinct reasons. The first is most of the bosses have large AoE attacks, hit hard, and in some cases additional mechanics. It makes things easy to mess up, coupled with comparatively small amounts of time to practice. Remember, you'll typically spend 40 minutes simply getting to the boss, so even if you spend 10 hours on that stage, it only comes out to 40 or so minutes of experiencing the fight. More than enough for some to master it, though others might be left in the dust, especially if you spend more time on the floor than in the fight. Thankfully, it isn't all bad, as there are a couple ways to mitigate some of the difficulty. The first is the relic system, which allows players to start with predetermined benefits. Each relic comes in a couple different colors that needs to match an equipped urn, goblet, grail, and you get the point. These being unlocked through progression and character quests. Each relic gives up to 3 perks from a pool that some sources suggest is just under 300. Unfortunately, this means getting a good roll is extremely difficult. Seriously, you can spend an hour rolling and fail to get anything remotely useful. This makes creating a cohesive build rather difficult. Oftentimes I might get something useful, like Guardian's Art heals nearby allies, but it will be paired with intelligence and poison negation. Thankfully, From Software recognized this potential issue and offered a few relics with a set roll. How useful they are will vary, but it's good to have a few things that will always be great options. Runs worked in a similar way. Unless explicitly stated, perks are active as long as they are in your inventory. It can help mitigate some of the problems associated with bad weapons and abilities, not to mention make random drops a bit more interesting. That said, I wish Nightreign was better at presentation. On a run, it is easy to tell when a weapon needs to be held to work, but outside of that it feels cumbersome. Certain effects will simply tell you what it does, though it's on the player to figure out the specifics. Art reduction was one example I found, with Steam user TechQ posting the results of their test. According to their post, a +3 art's cooldown is equal to 9%. They also confirmed it's stacked, plus a few other things. Look, I assume this is a Souls game doing Souls things, but it's unfortunate given these details can have a substantial impact on build. Not to mention makes things harder for the player and more importantly anyone they play with. Normally, I'm pretty forgiving when it comes to glitches or other minor mistakes. Yeah, losing a fight is frustrating, or anything related to trophies or achievements. In recent memory, this happened with Cookie Cutter and Rhythm Sprout, where I have everything done for the platinum, but I don't have the platinum because it glitched. Though these things are rarely so bad that I note in a review, especially if the only issue is the trophy and achievement. In Nightraign's case, even a minor issue can cause a major problem due to the time commitment. At least I'd be frustrated failing a 40-minute run because I couldn't lock on to a fallen ally to revive them. Not just because it is harder to get the hits needed to bring them back, it wastes time I likely don't have. Even a 20-second delay could wipe the team because I'm fiddling with these problems. In a few cases I couldn't even register a hit. It corrected itself once the person unfortunately failed to revive, though it's simply not what you want to see in a game like this. I'm happy to say they're rather uncommon, though you can expect some performance issues throughout, both of which I hope to see eliminated sometime in the future. To be perfectly honest, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about Nightreign. It absolutely has enough value to warrant the $40 price tag. I mean, simply beating the game with no failures offers about 6 hours of gameplay. To fight every optional boss along with finishing each character's story, it can easily exceed 30 hours. That's better than a lot of games. It's honestly better than a lot of roguelites. Where my apprehension comes into play is the overall loop. I simply don't think it's different enough. Once you figure out the optimal path, along with the best weapons for your situation, runs feel interchangeable. It also doesn't help that it's pretty common for redundancy to appear in each run. I can do 3 flame camps in a single run and get the flame chariots all 3 times. That isn't a huge deal, they're among the easiest bosses in the game, it just doesn't enhance the overall experience. Maybe it will get better long term, we could always get more bosses, perhaps more options are added to each element. But in its current state, I think the core experience is ultimately going to resonate with players who just want Elden Ring with more variety. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, and for more content, please subscribe.